Welcome to season 2 of Navigating Realities, where dialogue meets understanding. You know, we spend our lives really going through systems like race, religion, and politics. But what if those systems don't really tell us the full truth? What if those systems tell us what we think about ourselves, but not really tell us who we really are? So Navigating Realities, we try to have that discussion, not answer the questions about that, but really to get us to sit with contradiction and be more comfortable with that and comfortable with ourselves, and then we may be more comfortable with others. So that's what this conversation about. So today we have our special guest, New Jersey Attorney General Jennifer Davenport is with us today. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You are the second Attorney General that we've had on the podcast.
Excellent.
So I'm happy to have you here, happy to see you. Before we jump into the questions, I just had one question that I'd like to think about. Like, what is something in your life that you learned your whole entire life that you're not so sure holds true to your life right now?
Maybe that you just knew. I think what I learned now is that you just don't know everything. Mm-hmm. Not that I ever thought that I knew everything at all, but you kind of had a sense about either where you grew up or the people of New Jersey, but every day you meet different people and you learn even more about backgrounds, about cultures, about just ways that people grew up or things that they do. And I think for me, you think that you've met so many different people over the course of a career, over the course of a life, but there's always more to learn.
Wow, that's incredible, because when we're dealing with people, and I'm not, like, you're in a position where you see people at their best and at their worst. How does that sit with you? How do you navigate that tension when you know you're in a position that you're in? And we'll get into that a little bit more, but how does that sit with you? You're seeing the worst of people and the best of people. What does that do to you?
It's incredibly heartbreaking, honestly. I think it's amazing when you see people coming together and people rallying to help others. And that's certainly what we try to do at the department, right? Like, all of our full mission is public safety, but it's also how do we work with all of the different areas that we have in government to make sure that life is better for the people of New Jersey. But as a career prosecutor and somebody who's worked alongside law enforcement, you're right. I've seen people when they've really been down and made really terrible choices and have committed bad acts. What I try to think about a lot is that doesn't define who you are, right? And I think that's a really important piece. And I think as a prosecutor and as somebody who has worked really hard to make sure that there is repercussions and certainly that there's consequences for actions, and to hold people accountable for that, I think it's really important also that you have that extreme empathy. I don't think we should be doing this job at all, any of us, if we don't really see the human side of it. And even though there have to be retribution or punishment or whatever that may be, it doesn't define you, the worst thing that you've done.
That's really interesting. You use the word defining person, because that's hard. I mean, quite naturally, when someone commits a crime, you instinctively want to judge them. But to be in a position you're in, like, you really have to, have that empathy. Where does that empathy come from? Where did you grow up and learn? Oh, how did you learn that?
I definitely think it's come over time, right? I mean, my parents are people who have always been very civically minded and engaged in the community where I grew up in Wildwood, down in South Jersey. And
Wildwood?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Do a whole podcast.
Yeah, on Wildwood. That's really great short town.
Yeah. So they're still very much involved in the community and with the different work there. But I think my mindset has definitely shifted over the years. Whereas when I first got out of college and I worked for the Drug Enforcement Administration, I think I was more focused just on the enforcement piece. And then over time, when you sit across the table, when you're talking to people who you are prosecuting and you hear more about how they grew up and stories and things of that nature, and you see patterns over time. And I learned then, coming over to the state years ago when I started for the first time here, you just see how all of this builds and what more can be done on the front end. And I think that maybe with age, you always have that, you always have that growth anyway. But for me, that's, I think, how it's morphed over time, where I've really started to think about, okay, what more can we do to prevent, to educate, to deter. There's obviously a huge role for enforcement, and it's really important and necessary. But even when we announce, large takedowns or operations, you have to do that, and it's really important to keep people safe by making sure that you get guns off the street or whatever it may be. But you also have to think about the human side of, okay, what's next here? How do we make sure that we break those cycles of violence?
Now, you really keep coming back to the human side, and I'm curious, there are some law enforcement that doesn't see it that way. Obviously, there's been some reports about what's happening in New Jersey around state police. What is the core, what drives you to focus on the human side? What a part of your background, was it DEA, was it the opioid crisis? You've had a lot of experience in law enforcement, and being an attorney. What was there an incident in your life that triggered something for you?
I don't think so. I think it's just a compilation of, and I think the law enforcement officers, agents, federal, state, county, local, whomever I've worked with over the years, the ones that are, there are so many that really do think about it this way. I know that there are stories and there are incidents and there are cases where you don't have that, but you do have the majority of people, I think, that come into these types of professions really want to do it because they want to help keep people safe, but also want to connect in some way to change those cycles. So I think I've learned from those great kind of role models and people over time.
Wow.
Yeah.
There is that tension between what happens from a policy perspective and enforcing a law than the actual lived experience in communities, particularly communities that are marginalized communities. How do you balance that?
Listening, learning, honestly, keeping our minds open all of the time and our doors open all of the time so that we can understand more. And I think also bringing into any profession, bringing people in from, that reflect the diversity and the different people that are within our state to make sure that you have that perspective, not just by listening once a week or just going around and talking to different people, but also it's so important when we have, particularly in law enforcement, when you have people who grew up in different areas or people with different lived experiences so that they can then help others understand what that means too. And then when you're in the community, you can say yeah, I live here too, or yeah, this was my experience as well. I think that's really, really key.
Yeah, many folks don't realize how large the Office of Attorney General is. You oversee over 8,000 employees?
That's right.
How do you balance
24 divisions.
24 divisions. How do you balance that? How do you, there's just so many different departments under your authority. How do you balance that?
With amazing people that work in our department. That's really it. We have to, obviously, as the Attorney General, you have to set the clear vision and the priorities and what you want to get done. But that isn't isolated either. That's with input from folks that are career public servants. That's input from folks around the community and stakeholders and advocates and all the different people that we want to work with and we do work with every day. But we balance it by making sure that everybody knows clearly what we're working toward and how we want to get it done and what our values are. Right? Our values are very much in line with, frankly, Governor Sherrill's mission to make sure it's customer service. How are we getting things done? And it's something that I really appreciate because if we think about that and we're doing what's right for the right reasons, it's easier.
When you run into situations where there's tension in the departments, because there's always that large of an office, there's tension. What is the core? How do you manage that? What brings you back to your core? How you resolve that tension?
First, I think you have to figure out why, right? What's behind this? Is it people worried about maybe something they've always worked on and they're afraid that power is going to be stripped? And not power, capital P power, but just I've always worked on this. What's happening now? Why are you going to take that from me? And kind of understanding also that I'm a temporary steward of this office, right? There's been 62 attorneys general before me, and
only a few females, though, right?
Yeah, a handful. So making sure that that people recognize that even though I may have a certain vision and I may want to do it this way, that I'm not trying to say that everything else that you've ever done was no good, right? That's clearly not what it is. It's just trying to make sure that we're stay focused. So to your question about if there's conflict or whatever it may be, I think trying to figure out, okay, like let's cut out the noise, like what is really at the heart of this. And then look, we may not always agree on with anybody, right, about how we want to do it, but ultimately at the end of the day, they can at least know why we're doing it and what the thought process is, and hopefully, get the buy-in early on.
So when you think about conflict resolution, I hate to use those terms, like everybody uses those terms, but like, where did you learn that? Was it something you learned at home, or is it something you learned in
Well, an only child, so I'm not sure.
But there's always conflict with parents, right?
Oh yeah,
right?
Oh yeah. So I say that because I have two daughters, and there's a lot of conflict between the two of them, and I'm like, gosh, I missed out on this, completely. But yes, I've conflict with parents, with friends, with watching, around you. And I think it's, again, something you learn over time. I got to say, if you were sitting here talking to me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I'm not sure I would have, and let's do this again in 6 months and I might have a different answer, right? But I think you're constantly kind of opening your eyes to say, all right, there's got to be a different way here to figure out how people tick and why it is that we want to. People just want to feel heard, and people want to feel like they're part of the solution. And if you just tell them what to do, they're not going to ever feel that way.
Yeah, I never really think about it too much in terms of like law enforcement, but law enforcement really has a distinct job of really studying human behavior. What have you learned about human behavior over your career? That
it can change, right? In an instant. And that it's very much a product of, I think, where, what your circumstances are. When you think about the majority of crime, you think about what motivates, whether it's for profit or to sustain life, whatever it may be. Survival. Like, you certainly have a lot of people who are trying to exploit others, and that, one of the priorities I've set aside is combating human trafficking, not set aside, but emphasize is combating human trafficking. And when you think about what people must do in order to deprive others of their liberty in that way, and to profit off of that, it's just so. And that goes back to that conflict and that challenge you have, like where you want to see, okay, how do you then break that cycle so that people continue to be victimized? And you have to think about the victims, and you think about like how trauma-informed approach to all of these things. But I think that's what you kind of learn over time is kind of, okay, what's the motivation here? Because I think that helps to figure out, okay, what's the prevention that we aim toward.
It's very difficult, I think, in some folks to really understand. I recall the time I was in court, and there was a young lady being tried, or to decide whether she's going to be tried as a kid or an adult. She had a mental breakdown and had stabbed a person. That person died. She was only 14 or 15 at the time. And I didn't want to know the outcome of it because it was too much for me. You see this stuff, Jen, like, how do you sleep at night? Like, how do you stay mentally sharp when you see some horrific stories like this? Like, and you talk about human trafficking. That's tough.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And I think when you don't see it for what it is, and when you assume it should be normal, or, oh, this is just another day, I got to say, like, the people that we work with, and the men and women, the people in law enforcement in the state, like, truly see that and are horrified by some of the actions that people take, and the consequences and the victimization. Because unless you are seeing that, I think you need to stop doing what we're doing, right? I always said this when I was a federal prosecutor, and I ran general crimes, and I would help. My job was to train new assistant United States attorneys. And part of what we always talked about was, if you stand up in court and it's easy for you to say, we recommend this sentence, and it's long and you know what's going to happen, if that's really easy for you to say, think about that,
Wow.
right? Because you have to really think about what is happening and all of those pieces. And I think that makes you a better, frankly, I think it makes you a better prosecutor, because you're always looking to make sure that what is the righteous and just outcome in your mind. Of course, people may differ on what that is, right? But you have to know why it is that you're asking for what you're asking for and what the consequences are to that. So it's been hard. I mean, I don't have any other way to say it, that I find it really sometimes some of the things that we view and the work that our folks do is incredibly hard, and that's why we have to make sure that their mental health is cared for, and that there's outlets for people who, when you think about the child sexual abuse material, right, and what you're looking at all day long, and if that's your steady diet at work and you're always watching that, and you go home to your kids, that's a lot that we ask of people.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
Do you think it changes the way you parent?
I certainly ask a lot of very specific questions to my kids.
Yeah.
Like, we know. So I don't know. I've only ever been a parent with this background, so I don't know what I would, how I would be otherwise. But I certainly know a lot of my friends who have kids who aren't in the same profession I am, and I love how they're approaching parenting. So I think we all come at it with whatever lived experience we have. But I think, do ask a lot of specific questions that maybe I try to be age appropriate, but I just use my work and I.
Yeah, it's funny because you think, we sometimes, like you say, well, I don't want to be like my parents, but then you realize that you are like your parents.
Yeah.
What did you take from your childhood growing up that really centered you when you're having a rough day?
That way, I just felt like my parents were always there for me, in a way that at the time I didn't really maybe understand, but certainly now, juggling and balancing, who balances anything, but like juggling the different demands that you have, whether it's work or whatever it may be, I realized just how grateful I am and how amazing it was that my parents were there. My dad recently received an award from alumni award for Atlantic Cape Community College, which is a community college down in South Jersey, and that's where it took him more than a decade to finish. And he said in his speech that he's like, I appreciate my mom, he appreciates my mother, and then also to me, he says there was a lot of sacrifices of playtime and something else when I was doing this. I don't remember it. So that makes me feel good that my kids won't remember that I'm not there sometimes. But I don't remember that, because I do remember them being present. I do remember them being a huge part of my life.
Wow.
And they still are.
Well, that's, one of my best, I think, education that I've gotten. I've been to community college in Philly, and I graduated from Temple, but some of my best professors were CCP, Community College of Philadelphia. I love community college, and I think a lot of our kids should take advantage of that.
Yeah.
But getting into like these issues around your home and growing up, there's a lot around law enforcement that has to do with race. Like how did growing up that play a factor in how you see race today? Yeah.
So I grew up in Wildwood, which has lots of ethnicities and different races. I mean, my grade school was very small. My high school a little bit larger, but still pretty small. But growing up in a town where I'm white and many of my friends were black.
You're white?
I know. I was like, just if we're talking like truly like different races, right? Many of my friends were black. I had Hispanic friends growing up, or Latino friends. And then my mom's family is from Brazil. Her dad was the only person of his family that came here. So my entire mom's family is still in Brazil. So we would have regular communication with our relatives in South America. So I feel like I had exposure to people that were not like, maybe didn't look like me, right? And I had a very comfortable relationship with law enforcement. My father's a retired firefighter. He was a career firefighter. And I was always at the fire station, right? I was always, and that's connected to the police station. And his brother was the chief of police. So like, I think that in our family or in our friends, I was very comfortable because I saw them as helpers. But I recognized that just a few blocks down the street, literally, or block, or behind our house or next door, people may have had a different relationship if they didn't see that. So even though you're maybe even in the same community, it really is your relationship and how comfortable you are based on maybe how you're treated or how you perceive you will be treated. If it's not a reality, it may be the perception. But either way, it's something that I've definitely thought more about, obviously, in the roles that I've had over the last decade or so. And I mean, we talk to students a lot. We talk to younger kids and ask them, just yesterday, we were asking, why do you feel comfortable with law enforcement? When don't you? And then, but sometimes the answer is really about like getting to know people for who they are and not what law enforcement represents as far as are they there to protect you, or are they there, in some cases, people believe to hurt them, right? And that's difficult.
How do you build that trust? Because there are some historical implications where that distrust comes from, right? So this is not made up.
No.
So how do you restore trust in communities that really have been victimized by, what some folks would call over-policing?
I think owning it is number one, right? I honestly think like really being very eyes open about that it does exist. Like you said, it's real. I had I call it like an amazing transformational experience. Back in March, I was able to go down to Selma for the it was 61st anniversary of Bloody Sunday. There were some attorneys general that were doing a panel, and ISJ was hosting with that panel, Ryan Haygood, and I heard about it, and I said, I want to go. So some two folks from my office and I went down, and we went to the Equal Justice Museum, and we listened to different people speak, and we crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and we talked to foot soldiers who are now in their 70s, but were teenagers at the time, and just hearing the fear that they had, right? This wasn't that long ago. It was 61 years ago. Yeah. And, fast forward and you think about what our country, the experiences of our country and the tensions with law enforcement, and how law enforcement at times was used for this, for taking away, or before they even existed, maybe the civil rights of folks, right? Or for just that complete, dehumanization of people. I think it was eye-opening, and I've had conversations with folks who were down there in law enforcement with me since then. Pretty much every day we talk about, gosh, like, isn't that, because it's not a lived experience that I have had, right? But so many people have, and I think that back to that owning it and just knowing that this is real. We see you. How do we make it better? How do we understand that how the interactions or whatever they may be? How can we make sure that we're understanding that so we can move forward together, and that we get to know one another as humans and not just like what your roles may be in any particular situation.
Does religion play a background in? Did you come from a particular faith or anything?
I mean, don't tell my mom, but like, I grew up going to Sunday school, like a Christian non-denominational church, but I'm still trying to figure it out.
I think we all are. That's the secret no one wants to talk about, right?
Yeah.
We're all trying to figure it out,
and
regardless of what faith you're in. Right?
I ended up doing like RCIA as like in my 20s because I thought like, okay, I'm going to do this with Catholicism, but I don't. I've tried to figure out over time, I'm trying to like even in this role, and when I was at the state before as a first assistant, you spend a lot of time in houses of worship and churches, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this, like my like, are you there, God, it's me, Margaret, like journey of like, how do I figure out what this is? I don't know yet. Stay tuned.
Well, I'm a reverend. I'm still trying to figure
Yeah,
it out.
yeah.
But I tell folks I have a Buddhist teacher, an imam, a rabbi, and a pastor. So I love them all.
Yeah,
So,
that's the thing. Like I
bring them all
love
together. Yeah.
what everybody brings to me, but like I don't feel it as much as I do sometimes when I'm just kind of sitting and talking to somebody. I believe that in some higher spiritual, but I'm just not sure what that is. But maybe we can't define it, right?
Well, maybe you get the energy from talking to other people.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
could be your spirituality.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in the business that you're in, like you talk to people all the time. So I think we do feed each other. And that's one of the things that we possibly miss. And in your work, you talked about, one of the things that you guys talk about is affordability in housing. You guys have been working on segregation. You oversee the Division of Civil Rights, discrimination in housing. Like, how has that work been rewarding for you?
Oh, it's incredibly, when you not just identify a problem, but have the resources and the authority to really do something about it, there's nothing that's more rewarding than that. I think that so often, we may be inundated with our social media, or you're reading news articles and like, gosh, but then knowing that you can, and I think that's what the blessing of this office is, that we talked about it before, 8,700 people in 24 different divisions, Division on Civil Rights, and just being able to really figure out, okay, what are our regulatory authorities? What are our enforcement authorities? What's our power here to really make good change? It's incredibly rewarding, and it's I think a real privilege to be able to do that, and for the people that we work with to be able to do that. But it's also I'm trying to think of what the word is, but you don't want to squander the moment, right? You don't want to squander the opportunity or the ability to really do everything you possibly can, because we do have that authority to do it.
What about at times when you have the power to do something, but the power is not enough? I'll never forget Brian Stevenson saying, like, he realized that when he has to make that call to a person on death row, that he couldn't get off death row, and that person ultimately is going to be put to death. And he says, I make that call, and that person thanks him. And he said that in that moment, I realized the law is limited. Have there been moments in your life that you was like, wow, I have all this power, I have all this authority, but there are some limitations to it?
Yeah, I mean, and there's good reason a lot of times where there's limitations too, right? Like you don't want to, like,
going
to be
rogue.
clear, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Some
good
folks
to
in
have
DC
those
right now, but
checks
that's not going.
No, it's good to have checks and balances on any individual or entity's authority. But yeah, I mean, I can't think of a specific example, and I maybe at the moment, but there have definitely been times. You feel like your hands are tied a little bit, where you do everything you possibly can, or you realize, if I do this in this case, that might actually hurt our ability to do it in other cases. So we have to be very prescriptive and sometimes more surgical about how we take action to then move it to the next step. But yeah, no, I can think of actually a couple of things right now that I'll keep to myself at the moment, because they're sort of active about how I want to do something, but we have to kind of do it in the right way, or the right steps, I should say, to make sure that we can have that kind of lasting change, and that we don't have maybe court action that would interfere.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about, because sometimes we in the public, we don't realize why decisions are being made, because if you make a certain decision, it affects other decisions down the line. Can you talk a little bit about that? Explain, because I think not many people realize that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everything has like a ripple effect, right? And you have to think about also what precedent there is before. It doesn't mean that you can't do something different, but whatever action you take in a particular case, I think part of our very important responsibility is to make sure that you have, not just due process in any individual case, but also you think about it from an equal justice perspective, that you're looking across the board, and it's even when you're taking a look at different, whatever it may be, whether it's civil enforcement or whatever, that you're treating cases similarly based on the whatever the facts are. You always want to take a look at the facts. You always want to take a look at the law, and then you see how they apply to each other, and then you see what the outcome is. Not every case, though, is going to have the same. Even the law may be the same, the facts are going to be very different. Right. So you have to kind of always, pressure test that and make sure that you're balancing it to make sure that you're hitting the right outcome.
You ever get frustrated in that space sometimes?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Because you, or that or you believe that you don't kind of come into things with at least I don't, with predetermined outcomes, right? I think that's the beauty of investigations. It's the beauty of the work that we do, is that you are like a researcher. You're somebody who gathers facts. You're somebody who makes inquiries to get more information and see kind of where that leads you. You think maybe something may be afoot, but you're not entirely sure. And then you kind of work with that over time. Sometimes already, and then you have to work backward to figure out why or who. But I think it can be very frustrating sometimes to reach a particular outcome. You have whatever facts you may need, but then maybe the law isn't exactly on point. Or maybe there's precedent where that if you bring this, it's not gonna have an outcome that you want, or that you could actually risk making law for the future that could actually harm other cases. But all in all, I think that's how our system is. The beauty of our different ways of working with all the different systems of government, and also like democracy. Like it does shake out in a way that I think is very positive. But individually, sure, like you can get frustrated sometimes.
Let's go back to Jen and the Wildwood days, going through high school. Did you see yourself in law enforcement? Was it something that you always knew you wanted to do, or how did that come about?
No, I wanted to be like a dancer and in theater. So I went to college with that purpose.
Really?
Yeah, 100%.
You're a music or theater major?
I wasn't at the end. So I went to a college that is now DeSales University. It was called Allentown College at the time. They had this wonderful Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival every year. So liberal arts college, but had an emphasis on this wonderful theater program. I wanted to go to New York. I wanted to just go to a performing arts school. Really? My parents were like, okay, like maybe you get a degree in something, general, like you have some other things to fall back on.
You're going to have a job, right?
Yeah. So, supportive.
I was that parent. My son's in theater, but I'll tell you.
Yeah. So I loved it. All I wanted to do was perform. I love, being on stage. I danced my whole life. So I'm not a great singer, but I faked it all through the plays and musicals that I did. But then when I got to college, it was Division III, and I was also playing tennis for them, and I played softball there too. But I was playing tennis at the time, and it was one of those things where very early on you realize you can't do everything. So being in that program and the intensity of that program, and also carrying like a sport, and I recognized very early on that I couldn't do that, and I was 17. I didn't want to make a choice necessarily, but I ended up, I guess, making a choice of saying, okay, I'm not going to focus completely on this program, and I'm going to just be undecided for a while. And so back to your original question, no, I did not see myself in this field, although there are a lot of, you'd be surprised, maybe not surprised, but how many lawyers or people that work in this profession actually have theater and kind of drama type degrees. I think really? Part of what we do, right, is very much.
Wow, that's interesting.
A lot of my actually good friends, maybe you just end up gravitating toward people who have similar interests. Who knows? But I know a lot of friends who have these backgrounds as well, and who have actually stuck with it. Good for them. So it's like, one of these unfulfilled dreams, I guess. But
so was there an incident that led you to law firm? Like how did that come about?
Honestly, I think it was just over time in college. I had switched my major a ton of times. You don't know what you're doing. You just take different classes. And then I had a professor who was a retired FBI agent, and he brought in a retired DE agent who was also an actor who switched roles and became I said, oh, this is interesting. And I think the courses I took in criminal justice, I really just liked. I thought it was so interesting. Again, back to that investigation, trying to solve like solve something or try to put pieces together and try to understand. And I really did like human behavior, or still do. So I think part of that was trying to understand why things happen and why people may commit certain acts, or why people act a certain, or engage in certain behavior. So over time, that just spoke to me. And then I thought like working for the government just seemed something like I wanted to do. So I applied kind of all over right out of college, USA Jobs, and may still exist, I don't know, with the federal government. And I thought like this seems interesting. You can go to different places and kind of understand how this works.
I mean, you had an amazing career, and now you're Attorney General, so you've done some significant work in this space.
Yeah.
You know, didn't know. We had to have a longer conversation about theater.
I love it.
You know, my son's in theater, right?
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, he's been in Hadestown, West Side Story, Bad Cinderella. He's on tour with David Burns right now, but that's a...
Oh, I'm obsessed. How did I not know this? I'm sorry.
I'm surprised we didn't have that conversation, particularly with Abby, because she's a theater nut too. So yeah, he's all...
We're all over.
And I was that parent, like, you sure you want to do this? Like, maybe...
It sounds like it's working out for him. So.
Well, I tell you, it has, but be honest with you, I was like, oh my God, this kid's gonna, how my kid's going to survive?
Yeah, exactly. You want to make sure that you're setting them up for success.
And obviously you've now it's not too late. I mean, you think you'll ever go back to?
Oh my gosh, I'd love it.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
I did some things. So, Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. Have you ever heard of that? So, in New Jersey, different lawyers who help artists, maybe with copyright or other types of things. Yeah. So they had fundraisers. They traditionally had fundraisers. Talent shows, and then turned into actually musicals. So I did 2 of those. Really? A while back now. The last time I did it was well over 15 years ago, but we did a couple of musicals when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
What musicals were they?
Pajama Game and Bye Bye Birdie.
Bye Bye Birdie.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big theater person, even though my son's in it. So I look up these shows and I'm like, oh,
yeah, they're both pretty, like, I think 50s or 60s.
Yeah, I went to see. It's so funny. I went to see Hair, and I was like, oh, my son was in Hair, and I was like, oh, maybe they should retire this one, but. I want to get in trouble with the theater people, so I'm not.
No, that's the beauty of theater. It's just like art, right? It speaks to different people in different ways.
I think Les Mis is just too long. The
music's lovely, but I agree.
It's too long.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have a bit of a shorter attention span. I love these like musicals that are or just
my favorite.
Drama.
I loved Hadestown.
Yeah,
that's when he was in that and it was just my favorite.
Yeah, this new trend of like 70, 80, 90 minutes, no intermission is like.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
And because all the other ones, you gotta. I don't want to get in trouble with the theater folks. You gotta sit through an intermission, then you gotta go back to another long, like Les Mis. I was like, oh my God, is this thing ever gonna?
I mean, I absolutely
it's beautiful
love
music.
It. Yeah, no, I love it.
I have a great appreciation for folks who are in theater. The Broadway life is brutal.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine
what it does to these kids' bodies. Is just so hard.
It's like they are professional athletes.
They are,
right? And you also know that over time, the roles and what you can do, right? So you feel like much like I said before, like you need to capitalize on this moment because you're not going to be there. You just want to make sure you do everything you possibly can.
Yeah. So it's so funny. We should be talking about theater more. But coming down to our discussion is like, what do you think? What would you say to a young person? Who really want to get into law enforcement? What would you say to them?
I would say like why? Just make sure that they, number one, be excited, right? Because we want more people to be considering these careers. But then say, why is it that you want to do that? And try to like have them start to think early on about all the things, the wonderful things that you can do in the roles where you can be there to protect, to serve, and just make sure that's part of their reasoning, right? I have so many people who I've talked to, so many young people who are in this situation, because I also feel like at a certain time, in your career, like you really owe it to everybody that you possibly can if they want to talk to you about guidance or where you should go. I try to do it as much as I can. my kids are always like, oh, Mom, they don't want to hear from you. Because I'll start talking to them and they'll say, oh, we're thinking about going to law school. I'm like, oh, great, call me. And they're like, maybe they don't want to talk to you. I'm like, well, they brought it up, so I think they do. But I think, and if they don't want to call, they don't call. But I think it's really trying to think about it early on. Because you ask me now, and I still don't know what really drove me. It wasn't until I actually then went to DEA and then learned more, and then I went and became an assistant United States attorney, and then that's where I thought, like, oh gosh, what remarkable work we can do to help others and serve and protect in ways alongside law enforcement, even if you didn't want to be maybe a gun carrier or someone who was on patrol. But I don't think that I ever really thought about that early on. And I think the more people can, I think they may see other even avenues within the law enforcement profession that may open up for them.
What do you know now that a young Jen didn't know when you first got into this business?
That everything's not black and white.
Say a little bit more about that. What do you mean?
Yeah, I think when I first got in, like out of college, or I thought, like, this is the law, you break the law, and I just think that, sure, that's true, right? Like, there's a law and you have the facts and you figure that out. But I see kind of, I think, more of I think the holistic approach to making sure that we're combating any type of violence, whether it's gun violence, human trafficking, whatever, that you can't just be a law enforcement response alone. And I never understood that early on. And I also think working in, growing up sort of in the federal system, you don't see it as much as in the state. In the state, we're constantly thinking about all the other avenues because we have the ability to do that. Like in the federal system, it's you're a little bit more specialized, right? And that's just kind of how I understood it as well. It's definitely morphed over time, but I'm talking about when in the late 90s it was much more specialized and kind of and my focus was very, very specific and very small because I was a brand new analyst and I came in to do one particular job and then kind of morphed over time. But I think that thinking that anything is a law enforcement approach alone has definitely changed. And it's not just, okay, there's crime and then there's a law enforcement response. That is not it, right? I mean, when you think about gun violence, I mean, the reason why, a lot of the reason I think why we've seen the record lows is because of the investment in the community-based violence intervention programs, which, and really that victim-centered approach from making sure that we break those cycles. Also hospital-based violence intervention, also data and intelligence sharing, and then the civil action, right? It's just, there's just a lot of things that come into play. Yeah,
so I mean, it's been fantastic having this conversation and really thinking about your experience and what you offer and what you advise people getting into this work. And I think, when you talked about not seeing everything in black and white, was there a specific incident that you can think of that really changed and helped shape that for you?
I don't know if it was a specific one, but maybe just over time, probably when I was a federal prosecutor and I started to read pre-sentence reports.
What is that?
So a pre-sentence report is when you are either plead guilty or are convicted of a crime trial. Federal probation puts together a compilation of everything that is your life, basically, starting like questions about your childhood and things that you asked me, where'd you grow up and things like that. Sometimes, criminal history, of course, but also your work history and when you may have tried alcohol for the first time, just trying to understand who you are as a person. And when I would read these, I would see these patterns kind of emerge, right? Which is not new, but it was new to me because I had never seen that a person kind of as a full deep dive on that person. When I had worked for DEA, my role was, again, in a different intelligence analyst. I didn't see it all the way through, so I wouldn't have known everything about the person who may have been, charged with whatever violation. So reading those over and over again and recognizing, number one, we're talking about, again, the full person, and this was a lot of times horrendous crime, and the victimization that occurred. But then trying to figure out, and it's not for me to maybe figure that out, right? I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but like, why is this, But then you see, again, those patterns about, where and how people may have grown up, and opportunities that have been afforded to them, or not afforded to them. And that to me really opened my eyes to say there's more to this than a law enforcement response.
Yeah, I know, Jen, is so interesting because some people don't have compassion towards people who grew up either with the resources or not. And it's like, so what? I figured it out, you figured it out. How do you respond to people like that who just say, who cares,
I wish more people did, I guess. I guess that's my response, right? I don't know how to get you there, other than we learn more about each other, and we learn more about what it takes to really elevate us all, right? What is it? A rising tide lifts all boats, or whatever it may be. Like, how do we make sure to do that? And again, I am obviously the Attorney General, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer. I'm not saying like, oh, crime, it's fine. Absolutely not. But there's a world where we can prevent more, right? We can do more to figure out how we're really working kind of hand in hand with everybody who's trying to make it safer and better for everybody who coexists.
There's something you said that just struck with me. Like you said, I wish more people did care. How do we get people to care more?
I think that if you're in these roles, right? I think you have so many people within law enforcement who do want and care, but think maybe it's beyond what they're doing, right?
That's interesting.
Because like much like my roles in the past, right? You have, but I think nowadays where we see this more kind of holistic and also like 360 approach to things, there's more opportunities afforded to law enforcement officers to hand off, right? With whether it's our Arrive Together program, where we hand off with the mental, we co-respond if there's a mental health crisis, right? Where there are people there and they know that there's ability, because so much has been asked of our law enforcement officers over the years to be everything. And that's impossible to do. So making sure that they have what they need in order to really get folks in crises or otherwise, the resources they need, I think really helps, and giving those tools. But I think that it's also just kind of opening folks' eyes to make sure that they realize that there is more to whatever your role is. Yeah, and maybe that's just more education and cross collaboration among the different entities.
Yeah, you guys are doing a lot of training around that for folks, right?
For sure.
I think we don't realize the toll that and the different responsibilities that your office have in law enforcement is a lot. We ask them to do a lot. I think sometimes we just see the negatives.
Yeah.
And we don't see some of the great work they're doing. I mean, obviously, I don't know if it's coming through. For me, this conversation is really showing me there's a rewarding career in law enforcement. And I mean, you obviously just done tremendous work and you like it. You love what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do when you see such horrific things.
Yeah.
But you have this curiosity about human behavior that's just interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's been times though where I thought like I couldn't do it one more day.
Really? Yeah.
And there was a time when I didn't do it one more day. I did, I left, I was the first assistant AG, and I left about 3.5 years ago because I did feel like I needed a different, just a break and a little bit of a different perspective, because you do, the things that you think about all day long just seemed really sad a lot of the times. But there is so much positive of what you can do as well. But when it starts to outweigh in your mind and you're kind of like thinking more about the negative or the sad pieces, that's a tough place to be, right? So I am grateful for that kind of a bit of just a step back to say like, okay, yeah, let me just kind of like re-engage here with the world and think about this a little bit differently. And then, I mean, this opportunity came. I couldn't be more grateful and totally, surprised by it and thrilled though that it came my way. But I think that perspective also helps, right?
Yeah.
To then come back in and say, okay, we have real opportunities here, and we have really great partners. I mean, we have a new superintendent of the state police, Jeannie Hagemule, who also shares like everything I'm saying right now. We've had many of these conversations, and the great, we have our prosecutors who, throughout the state and the 42,000 people of law enforcement, like they're more often than not, you're going to find. The overwhelming majority of people wake up every day to do that right thing for the right reasons, and it's just how do we get those stories out?
It was interesting. You got to the place where you realized you needed to take a step back. What made you feel that? Because some people don't; they just keep pushing through.
Yeah, I think. It had come years after this happened, but with COVID, when. Right after the beginning of which was fine. I mean, it was not fine. It was awful, but that didn't affect me as much. But then during that time, you'll remember George Floyd was murdered. Yeah. And we were doing a lot of work here in the state with increasing trust with law enforcement. And we had already, there had already been a law here about fatal police encounters, and the AG's office is the primary responder to those, investigates those, and so we've been doing that work. But seeing A, what happened across the country, but B, not seeing that as much here in New Jersey, meaning the response was very uplifting because we had seen that the work that we were doing here within the communities for people to understand kind of how our law enforcement works and why we have transparency in the process and what we expect was really positive. But over time, working on those types of cases and it really, again, you see that and like some of the other larger like child sex abuse cases that came through and things of that nature. It was, you got to really, in my mind at least, I was focusing more on things that I thought were just really difficult. Yeah. And I had the luxury of saying, I'm going to try to do something new. A lot of career, public servants don't have that luxury to say like, oh, I'm going to just try something else for a little while.
Do you think it's a safe space in your industry for folks to have some mental breaks? I mean, do you think it did more work? Tell me more about that. Is there a space for folks in that space to say, you know what, let me step back for a moment? Is it?
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do now is really identify that. Back in 2019, I believe, when A.G. Graywall was the Attorney General, we had the officer. Yeah, amazing. And he brought me in as the first assistant, and I worked with him for the 3.5 years that he was the Attorney General, and then acting AG Brock after, and then a little bit of AG Plotkin, and learned something different from each of them and their approaches. And what we did with AG Graywall was start the resiliency program for law enforcement. There was a sheriff's officer, Pablo Santiago, who we were with 1 week, and he took his life that weekend. And just kind of seeing how fleeting, right? And how what you don't know what people are struggling. Yeah. And it may be work, it may be other things, but either way, what we control is we control the work piece, right? We can do that. And making sure that you have those resources, making sure that you destigmatize just what you said, understanding what you may need for your mental health, I think is really important, especially in a profession that historically was not going to ask for help. You're there to run to danger. You're there to help people. You got to be strong. Yeah, you're there to take that off everyone else's plate, right? And to be the one to shoulder that burden. So destigmatizing that is something we continue to talk about and how we can do that better. So I think we need to do more in that for sure. But I also think that having some diversity in the work and that, like I said before, the diet of what you're looking at each day, if you have the ability for us as leaders to do that, I think it's incumbent on us to do that as well, so that your whole career is maybe not 20 years of looking at child sex abuse material. That's going to take a toll. Yeah.
Well, it's been amazing having this conversation.
Thanks.
Final word I always ask our guests. What's your favorite quote and why?
So I'm going to go back to Broadway if we can. Which I didn't think was. I didn't know
we could have had a whole show about
I didn't
Broadway.
know we were going to talk about it in the
Yeah,
first place.
yeah.
But so I actually I have a bracelet. It's Avenue Q, which I don't recommend for people that are young adults because the content's a little racy, but it's puppets. I don't know if you ever saw it.
I haven't.
Okay, well, anyway, there's a song For Now, and it's about everything in life is only for now. And I think it's really important to remember because the highs, only for now. The lows, only for now, right? So it's like you have to live in the moments that you have the most gratitude and realize that it's not all luck, but I do feel that sometimes, right? That it's like, gosh, but for somebody plopping me down and wow, with these parents, like I wouldn't have had this, right? Whatever this is. So I think it's like those moments of wonder and amazing opportunity or whatever it may be, that's only for now. So make sure that you, number one, record it some way for you, but also recognize that it is fleeting. And then when you're really low, know that hopefully is also temporary.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it's a kind of a silly, funny song, but it really spoke to me, and particularly in this role. Yeah.
That keeps you balanced in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's also like a great catchy tune that you can like belt out in the car.
You want to sing it?
No. No, I don't.
We want to get you singing.
Do I? Yes. Am I going to? No.
We got to get you back on stage and really see some of your work. I didn't know about your Broadway and theater background. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I have no Broadway background, to be clear.
Well,
yeah. Aspiration, maybe. But
not right now.
Yeah.
Maybe. But yes, thanks so much, Attorney General.
Thanks. Thanks, Rev.
And we worked together in the past when Gabir was.
Yeah.
You were at that tension meeting when we were fighting Gabir on something. I forgot we were arguing about. He said, "Yeah, I'm working on redlining." I was like, "Redlining," and that's when you were there at that diner. And we was like, "Wow."
I was there.
I did not know that Attorney General's office can work on redlining and housing under the Division of Civil Rights. I was like, that's pretty cool.
That's right.
Now we can talk. And
That's
me
right.
and him became, I love that guy.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
So
I know this is you are asking me all the questions, but I will say that I really so appreciate, again, back to however long ago that was, that first introduction I had, but then over the years, the work that we've been able to do together. And your perspective is so, I think, wonderful because you are somebody who sees, I think, it from many different perspectives, and the work that you've done, in fair housing and just over the years, just not only your ministry work, but also the work in government. And seeing what government can be has helped really guide and push us forward. So I appreciate that.
No, it's been like all the attorney generals that's been, and then I'm, working with you under Gabir, working with Andrew Beck, and working with Matt. New Jersey's been amazing. The attorney generals that work at the office. I don't think people know how much the Attorney General office covers and the work that you all do.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I want to have this conversation, and just to talk, for people to get to know you and just to talk about life and what's going on and the work that New Jersey is doing.
Yeah.
Of course, I think, new governor bringing you on and setting the stage around affordability and looking at all these different issues the challenge that we have in New Jersey, but it's been phenomenal. I mean, I love working with you all, and that's, people may say, "What? You love working with Attorney General?"
Yeah.
I used to tease my son because he's on Broadway. He's like, "Dad," I was like, "Well, I'm on the phone with the AG," and it's like, "Here he goes again." He's on the. Like, I'm just saying, I'm talking to the AG. He's like,
yeah.
"Oh, I know, Dad. You're talking to the AG."
Yeah.
But I'm like, "Yeah, I talk to him all the time because it's great to work with you guys. It really is."
Yeah. And you're really to a person, right? With whether it's Division on Civil Rights, whether it's the work that we're doing, with the Division of Criminal Justice or the State Police, or all the regulatory, ABC, alcohol and gaming and racing, like you name it, like everybody is really just so focused on making sure that we make things safer and make it better. So
even the online stuff, you guys cover, like, you guys got to do so much, right? It's just like
Yeah, the Division of Consumer Affairs.
Yeah.
Like if you have a license in this state, it's coming through there and
Yeah.
making sure that people feel safe when they are going to the doctor, and people feel safe, in the licensing process, but also the work that we're doing to really protect kids' online safety and,
Yeah,
and
that's
pushing back
important.
against the major social media companies. And again, back to mental health, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that we do everything we can to hold people accountable.
Well, thank you, Jen.
Thanks.
It's just such a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you
Thank
being
you.
on.
Oh my goodness.
That's a wrap. So I'm trying to beat life because I can't cheat death. So that's it. Hey, this is Reverend Eric Dobson, and this is Navigating Realities podcast where dialogue meets understanding. Follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can find us on all streaming platforms.